All right. Mike, Chandra, are you guys both there?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody to the part 3 of our SART series of webinars. We're so happy that you could join us today. I know many of you have participated in the first 2 webinars. So this is the third and the final one, and kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. Really happy to have both Chandra and Mike Strong from the University of Akron with us today to share some final thoughts on how you can further develop or elevate your response teams on campus. Real quick, some housekeeping items. If you have not already muted your phone or your WebEx application on your computer, please do so. I am recording this webinar. Also, if you if you are working from a separate electronic device, your phone, a tablet, anything along those lines, please try to keep it away from the computer and phone from which you are listening in today, as we have had some issues with that causing feedback in the past. You also have access to a chat room on your WebEx application. That is the best way to get questions to the presenters as they are going through their presentation. Please do not be shy, and I will share those with them at the appropriate breaks today. So as I mentioned earlier, we're very lucky to have Chandra Witherspoon from the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence, who has really headed up this whole series and done the outlines and set the materials and worked with the campuses to develop the content. And so, Chandra, thank you so much for all that you've contributed to this series and supporting our campuses and communities here in Ohio. And we also have Mike Strong from the University of Akron to share a little bit about their Campus Save team. Mike has shared with us that he is not feeling the best, and so his colleague Kelsey will be joining as part of that too to help him save his voice as he continues to recover, and we hope you feel better soon. But thrilled that they're both here to share the work that they're doing at the University of Akron with you all today. So without further ado, I will turn it over, I believe, to Chandra is going to start us off, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to kind of help campuses steer their SARTs or campus response teams. So it's been a pleasure. So we've been talking, if you joined us on the first 2, we kind of laid a foundation on the first webinar, and then we kind of went into more of the prevention on the second webinar today. Super excited to have Mike Strong and his colleague with us. We're going to kind of give them a chance to go in, and it's one thing for Ann and I to talk about best practices and give you guidance, but it's a whole another thing for you to have a campus who's really doing it very well in terms of getting the community involved, the campus involved in the prevention and response to sexual assault. So I'm really excited to highlight that program later on in the webinar. I'm going to kind of quickly just give you some more tools, is what I like to call them, to go in your toolbox so that when you are building your campus-wide response team, or if you already have one and you're just looking to build a capacity a little bit more or go in a little bit more depth into ensuring that you have everybody at the table and that you have a great relationship with folks, just some tools that you can use. So today, what we really, Mike and I really want you to leave, really knowing and understanding your role in building a collaborative and trusting relationship across multiple professions. And partnerships to improve the response, and I would say the prevention. They go hand in hand to sexual assault. We'd love for you to be able to identify and implement some of the collaborative model to respond to sexual assault, and then the ability to just begin the CCRT process if you haven't already started that process. We're hoping that you'll get some tools that you can use to go ahead and build your campus-wide community response team today. So just quickly, kind of can't build a team without having collaboration, right? And so there are about 7 tenets of collaboration, and they're on this slide and the next slide. And then I'm kind of going to briefly touch on these, but then I have a worksheet that you can kind of use if you'd like to just really ensure that you're collaborating with folks. And what are the best practices when you're collaborating with folks? How do you really build that long-lasting, trusting relationship with folks that you're working with? We all sit in different vantage points and perspectives in our respective field, in our office, in our department. I work for the Ohio Alliance. So every time I'm in a meeting with law enforcement, it kind of looks different, right? They're really focused on the offender and getting the offender off the street. And I'm really looking at supporting the survivor. And that doesn't mean that we don't both have the same goals. We just have different vantage points. So how do we really ensure that we're working together, that I can collaborate with people who are different than I am and who have different vantage points than I do? And these are just some kind of ways. So Carrie, if you could move to the worksheet part of it, that'll kind of help folks. So when you're thinking about just, how you want to collaborate with folks, this is just a worksheet, and I can get this to you, Carrie, as well, if you would like. And we'll just kind of go through briefly the tenets of collaboration. So first and foremost is building relationships and getting buy-in, right? And examples of that are just going out and being an active part of your community, right? So if you are looking to, let's say, get the Rape Crisis Center to be a part of your team, or law enforcement to be a part of your team, actually leaving campus and going out and participating in some of their events, right? So Rape Crisis Centers have Take Back the Night, and campuses do that as well. They always have events. Law enforcement, they have events as well. If there are a sorority, a fraternity, or maybe athletes on your campus that are not currently around the table with you and that you're not collaborating with, go to some of their events. It's good for people to see a face that they remember. So folks have to know you sometimes before they trust you. So really just going out and immersing yourself in the community that you really want to come back and be a part of your group. And just being consistent and getting participation of champions, right? So we all know that, there are definitely leaders and champions in each organization and each office that are championing for the same cause you are. And so just figuring out who you need, what are the key stakeholders, right? And that doesn't have to be the mayor and Congress folks. You can have a key stakeholder on campus. Your student government president is a key stakeholder. If you have NPHC or the Panhellenic, whoever those folks are leading the president and the vice president, they're your key stakeholders as well. What other departments on campus do you need at your table, and how can you kind of get buy-in from somebody? But you definitely need buy-in from folks to increase that collaboration and to successfully work together. And then developing and fostering commitment and investment. Working together on initiatives really helps develop that commitment and investment, creating a sense of commitment and investment in the work, its purpose, and the process. So just working with folks and asking people, what is your vantage point, or can you do some cross-training? What are we committed to this work? And I think rolling into formalizing the process, before you formalize the process and in terms of an MOU, maybe a SART MOU, that you have different departments sign, folks on campus and off campus, you have to make sure that they're developed and that they're committed. So, the first or second meeting can't be the MOU, let's sign this document, right? You have to create what is our mission statement and our vision for our campus? What do we want for students and faculty on our community? So spending time talking about that and then sort of formalizing the process is really important. For me, formalizing the process has two different goals, right? So one is I always operate under the assumption that not all of us will be here tomorrow, right? Some people might, move away, get married. Hopefully I'll hit it rich and move away, maybe to another island. However, I want to make sure that I've built the infrastructure so people don't have to reinvent the wheel when they come after me, right? So even in the Alliance, I'm trying next year to put in some things in place where people aren't like reinventing the wheel, right? They aren't constantly looking for MOUs. I get asked that question all the time. What are some sample MOUs? Where are the other SARTs in the state? And so I'm working to solidify that and create a map so that people know where SARTs are, so that they can just go to the website. So that's one thing, right? Like making sure that the infrastructure is in place so people after you kind of know where to pick up. And I would say the second part of the formalizing the process is accountability piece. We all need to make sure, right, we're committed. We want the same thing. We want healthy campuses. We want our students and our faculty to be safe. And we need to be held accountable when something goes, wrong, because we don't always have a great day. And so some days I might not have the best attitude and I might offend somebody or do something wrong. How can I be held accountable, and that's formalizing the process as well. I think accountability is a big piece in that. So then just getting, resources, that can be personnel or money towards making your initiative successful, whatever that looks like. I think more importantly than funding sometimes is getting the right personnel involved to move your work forward. Practicing courage and vulnerability. It's okay to say, I don't know, or we messed up. It's okay to identify gaps in services. It's really great to hear from students so that they can help you identify gaps in services. So I know you all have the climate survey that goes out. I think I said this on the first webinar. I'm a big fan of listening sessions too with students, where you can invite your community partners as well to come in. And so students can really say, I didn't know where this was, or I didn't know who to call, or I went to the hospital and I had a horrible experience. It's okay to identify some of those vulnerabilities and areas of improvement, so that once you identify the gap of service, you can figure out a way to close that gap up. And then just taking action and creating change. So let's say you have a listening session and you get some feedback, and folks don't know some of your services on campus, or folks have had maybe not the best experience with some of the services, maybe on and off campus. We have to be committed then to closing that gap and creating the change that the students want to see on campus. So changing protocols or doing something different, it's okay. And I think the goal of a SART or a CCRT is to always constantly be improving the services, whether that's on campus or off campus. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but there are just some departments on campus that we really want to make sure that they're providing advocacy. So on-campus support groups, financial aid advocacy, housing residential life advocacy. How can we ensure that students are being supported and kind of guided through the process if they do experience any kind of sexual assault? So this is just a list of programs that would be ideal to ensure that when you're walking somebody through the process, that they're really getting help in all of these services. So we have a collaboration assessment and inventory that I've put on the next sheet, and I think this is just great for people who are kind of getting started or building their SART. It just lists the campus partners that you have or that you want to have on your team, the advantage of working with this partner, and then the challenges of working with this partner. And I don't think this is just for one department to have. I think this is great for you to do as a team. I do think that there should be some form of trust and relationship building that's already happened before you do this. But again, this is actually just going back to cross-training. When you first get started, my number, if you don't take away anything from these three-part series, cross-collaboration cross-training is really important. It's really important that you look at that folks have, where they sit, where their vantage point is, so that you know that you are very aware. People might be coming to the meeting and they might not be talking, right? So you might have sayings who are coming to your meetings. They might not be talking too much. And it might not be because they don't want to be there, or they don't want to be collaborative. It might be because there's a HIPAA violation that they're scared of talking about. So really having these intentional conversations in the beginning, again, before you start formalizing the process, and even further down the line, maybe reviewing some cases, with your community partners, really trying to figure out, what's difficult in working with the Title IX coordinator. What is it? Privacy, confidentiality? What is that? What is the advantages of working with Title IX coordinator? What do they offer to this group? What's the disadvantage of working with law enforcement? What are we struggling with in terms of, what's going on with them? And why do we need them on this group as well? And being able to have candid conversations. Again, I think this is something that you do if you already have some kind of trust factor and a foundation already built with your community partners. And then last but not least, the contact information. Again, something is going to go wrong. Something's going to happen. survivor is going to be upset about something in the process. And so just being able to identify, hey, Chandra went to that hospital call. The survivor came back and told the Title IX coordinator they had a horrible experience. Who do you contact at OAESD to ensure that whatever I did, I don't do that again? Or maybe it's more training that I need, right? So just having that contact information is really important. So there is a worksheet that you have, knowledge of process on your campus worksheet. But it's just really important to know, and if you don't take away a second point, please carry this with you. I think it's really important for us to know our campus and the culture. It's really important for us to know people that we're serving and to have them involved in our coordinating of services and response and prevention when we're building out protocols and policies. Far too often I see folks not including the voices of survivors when they're creating response protocols to sexual assault. And that just kind of blows my mind, right? I think that you have to have buy-in, you have to have voices from the folks that you're serving to better ensure, because they have a vantage point that you don't have, maybe as faculty. So to ensure that, this is what you're proposing is going to land the way you want it to land, I think you have to have buy-in. So this worksheet, and I'm pulling it up on my own as well, this kind of talks about, what's going on in your campus community. What are some factors about your campus to consider? Again, I think it's important to have voices of students. So what student groups are involved? Do you have different organizations on campus? Have you only focused in on one or two organizations and there are a few of them that you kind of haven't heard from? So kind of just gives you some overall items to consider and to think about when you're working to build your protocols on campus. And then there was one other worksheet that I think I sent out that I kind of wanted to briefly talk about, and it's the knowledge of process on your campus. I might have gotten the worksheets confused, processes on your campus, which I think is really important too. So the first question, if you're on the worksheet that I'm on, and sorry if I mixed the two up, when a sexual assault is reported, who responds to the call? I think that's the first question when you're forming your team, when you get your team together, to ask everybody on your team, right? So Title IX might have a whole different process than a faculty member. They might not know what to do. Or let's say somebody on your campus is, maybe in the janitorial services and somebody responds to them, or they, see a survivor in the shower or something on the floor. What happens? So everybody should know on your team what happens when somebody is sexually assaulted. What does the response look like? And if everybody doesn't know that, then there's some more training, cross-training that you need to do on your team. You should have a protocol that kind of answers all of these questions on this worksheet and includes everybody on this worksheet. And you can make it specific to your campus. I know all campus, doesn't have athletics and Greek life, but ensuring that there is a coordinated response is extremely important. And again, everybody on your team should be able to kind of answer these questions and know the policies and procedures and what it looks like for Title IX and what it looks like for agencies off campus as well. Is what I can tell you from working with rape crisis centers, that a lot of students aren't reporting to Title IX. They're just afraid that, it's not confidential. So they're going to rape crisis centers. And so really having those relationships with the rape crisis centers in your counties, if you have them, and I would say the hospitals as well. Some people don't call a rape crisis center or go to Title IX coordinator. They might just want to go to the hospital, especially if they know that the hospital will give out HIV prophylaxis and STI prophylaxis. So having that conversation with your hospitals too on what the process looks like. And I would suggest too, if you are close to a hospital and a hospital that has the same program or does the sexual assault forensic exams, they always have packets that they give out to survivors. So maybe having conversations with your hospital to see if there's a Title IX coordinator packet or some packet from your university that can be given to the survivors as well. Not knowing who might be students, but making sure that they have access and knowledge to what services are always also provided to if they just go to a hospital and they don't go to Title IX or a rape crisis center. It might be a great idea to have your card or something ask the hospital if you can put that in your packet as well. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk about the SAVE team, and I'm super excited for his portion. They've been doing great work.
Thank you, and I am also excited and grateful for the opportunity to talk. And let me just say also to the good folks at the University of Akron who are doing the work that give me a chance to be able to talk about that, and not just our successes, but also our challenges. We approach the work fairly humbly, knowing that we have a long way to go. But let me start. We'll talk about the history and just start with a timeline. And as you know, as we continue to do this work, we learn how much we rely on the shoulders and the work and the effort that came before us. And that's the first thing we realized at the University of Akron is people have been doing this work. Our students have been working with the Rape Crisis Center in Summit Medina counties for 20 years prior to the formation of our SAVE team. We just weren't aware of it. It was decentralized, and so being able to be a part of pulling each other together and speaking and continuing that conversation is a pretty exciting and important part. We started our formal work together in 2014. The Title IX coordinator at the university at the time pulled together 30 faculty, students, and staff and gave them a charge. We identified ourselves as a sexual assault response team, but really we were functioning more as a task force for the university, similar to the task force at Penn State, or some of the other large institutions that really had some high-profile incidences that they were working through. We were asked to identify what is happening at the University of Akron to respond and prevent sexual assault. We were asked what should be happening, and then to make recommendations. And those three simple questions sparked a flurry of activity. We were really racing for the first 4 or 5 months together until we were able to sign our first memorandum of understanding with Hope and Healing, the local rape crisis center here in Summit Medina County. And that was significant for us because that ensured that our survivors had 24-hour victim services. Of all of the services that we jointly provide together or kind of overlap between what can be provided by others at the University of Akron, that victim advocacy and especially having that anonymous and confidential hotline was something that really our students needed. So we're happy to formalize that, and it really, really worked well. Our next step was really to be able to report our progress to the Board of Trustees. That's really on our timeline because it was one of the seminal points, not just for our team, but for the University of Akron. Because we were presenting to the board, we had the ear of the President's office, the Office of General Counsel, and the President's Cabinet, all of the deans on campus. And they were then aware of the work in meaningful ways. And so every time we get a chance to talk to the board, it kind of cringe because it means work and preparation, but it's such a great opportunity. And so we're grateful that came to pass. That was really the end of our first chapter of our sexual assault response team. It wasn't until June that we had a chance to be able to look back and reflect and realize we needed to do some mission and vision work. And at that time, our university clearly told us they wanted a loud, boisterous, engaged sexual assault and violence education team that was working to prevent and to raise awareness. And so that's where our SAVE team mission grew from. And we didn't move away from response. We had a Title IX response team that was also formed to be able to help us. But prevention and awareness really became our focus, at least of the sexual assault and violence education team. And that would stay our focus and until we got a grant in 2018 from the Department of Justice, the Office of Violence Against Women. And that really helped us to be able to identify a need to do more primary prevention, but then also to be able to circle back around to be able to take a holistic look at the response. And so that's kind of pulled our work back together as a group. So one of the things that I hope you see in that history is that we're evolving and changing, and as we continue to find opportunities and challenges, that really shapes the work that we have moving forward. Let me tell you a little bit about our structure. We have a leadership team, an assessment team. The assessment team works on our campus climate survey as well as focus groups. Every other year we do a climate survey. The other year we do focus groups with students to learn more directly about their experiences. And then, of course, we do the benchmarking questions that are part of the Changing Campus Culture Initiative. So the assessment team takes care of that work. We have an education and an outreach team, a sexual assault awareness month team, and a team that works on branding or our awareness campaign. Well, that's how we were operating for about 3 years, and we really recently realized, again, because of that grant, that work needed to be centralized, that we were starting to work even within our community coordinated response team within silos. And so we brought that group together, and now we also added a policy team and a victim services team to be able to help us take, again, another critical look at our policy as well as the victim services. So those groups are leading us through that. The one thing I would just like to add about the structure of the team is that we've learned it's not as much about how we organize ourselves. It has a lot more success, has a lot more to do with how we choose to do the work. So transparency, taking the time to be able to understand our perspective from each other's positions, taking the time to be able to understand our availability from our colleagues' positions. I'm lucky in the Dean of Students office, 80% of my time is dedicated towards this work. But most of my colleagues on campus who are participating in our sexual assault and violence education team have 5 to 10% of their time. And so we have to be able to find ways for meaningful interactions and make the most of our human resource there. Also, we've had to develop annual meetings with one-on-ones, not once a week, once a month, but once a year with the members of our team, just to make sure that they're staying engaged. We've developed an assessment and participation survey that we used this summer to be able to ask our members, is this easy to participate? Do you feel value every time you're in one of our meetings? And if not, what can we do to be able to make this a better experience for you? And then especially in our committees that really get into the nitty-gritty, the difficult work of helping each other understand their experiences across our differences, we've had to develop facilitator roles and note-taker roles and formal structures, agendas that include the topics of conversation that are presented in advance of a meeting, are examples of work that we're working toward that allows for equitable participation. So that structure is important to us, not just because it's the work that we're trying to do, but it helps us understand how we can be the best partners and teammates for each other. Moving on, our sexual assault and violence education team has had a really great relationship with the Rape Crisis Center here in town. And I won't bore you with all of our details, but we started in 2014 with that MOU. And we had I got this great call from Vanessa, who was working as our campus services coordinator for the Rape Crisis Center in July. She called up and said, Mike, the Attorney General's office is coming to campus on Tuesday. Do you want to come? And I said, sure. And then I got off the phone and called the Office of General Counsel to say, hey, the Attorney General's office is going to be on campus. And they said, why? And I said, I have no idea. But we're gonna sit down and find out. We ended up having a really fun conversation. Our Title IX coordinator was able to join me in the Dean of Students office, the director, and our campus service coordinator. We just had a really open dialogue. And my sense is the Attorney General's office was aware of our work and had been following that MOU that we had signed. And, I don't know, but a month later, Terry Heckman, the executive director of our Rape Crisis Center, called up and said, hey, we're going to submit a VOCA grant, and we want your feedback and just what would be ideal, what would be the perfect relationship between the university and the Rape Crisis Center. And at that time, we had a campus services coordinator to provide services for our community. But what grew out of that VOCA grant application was having 7 dedicated staff from our local Rape Crisis Center to be able to provide services to the University of Akron. And that was really, really cool. And from 2015 to 2016, one of our challenges has been attrition of staff, both at the Rape Crisis Center and at the University of Akron. There's been 4 different campus services coordinators for the Rape Crisis Center. And there has also been 3 different directors for the Rape Crisis Center since we started the work. There's also been 5 presidents at the University of Akron in the last 5 years. And so both within the Rape Crisis Center and within our university, we've had to continually re-educate and retrain. And so that's been one of our challenges that we just continue to work through together. It has helped us along the way to be able to solidify our relationship. Our MOUs that we were signing were 1 year at a time, and then we made the commitment to extend to a 3-year commitment to be able to make sure that we are taking time to be able to interact with each other instead of worrying about the paperwork on an annual basis. And in 2018, we were able to extend our relationship to an additional agency in Holmes and Wayne counties. 180 is the local Rape Crisis Center, and we do have a branch campus, the Wayne campus of the University of Akron, in Orville, Ohio. So in 2018, we were also able to extend those services. So that's a little bit about our history with the SAVE team. I would just add that in that work, it's been incredibly important for us as we educate each other to be able to talk about the scale and the size of our organization. With 20,000 students at the university, 4,000 faculty and staff, we go slow. And the Rape Crisis Center is on it, and they have great ideas, and they're ready to go. And so sometimes we have to remind ourselves of how it is that they can be so quick, and remind our friends that it does take us time. And with that as well, it's important. We are a university, and one of the really great assets that we've been able to have within our Rape Crisis Center, within our sexual assault and violence education team, we've had 2 vice presidents and a dean of the College of Arts and Science who participate. They started as associate vice presidents and an associate dean, and their relationships have been able to sustain through some transitions and attrition at the university. But as we work to be able to find opportunities to be able to engage with each other, it really is important when we're doing our education and our outreach to be able to remind ourselves that we're working with faculty, and that the expectation that the faculty hold our students to regarding citation of resources or explaining your ideas from your own voice as opposed to borrowing someone else's ideas are the same kinds of things that they are expecting us to be able to hold ourselves to when we're talking about our climate data or when we're talking about our programs and activities. So we just have to remind and train ourselves back on that scientific method and that good English composition technique is one of the tools that has really served our SAVE team well. We've been very careful about that, and that's allowed for our team to be invited into some different spaces and do some outreach that we would not have otherwise had an opportunity to do. But let me tell a little bit more about the Friends of our SAVE team. So these are some of the folks that we've been able to work together and support our work. Defined Lines is a student organization, and they actually are a group who developed our Empower the Bystander Bystander Intervention Program. It's a group of PhD candidates who are counseling psychology majors in the graduate program, and their research, Dr. Nikki Johnson, one of their founding members, had wrote a paper that we've seen from our work with the grant, the Office of Violence Against Women, has been circulated broadly across the country. We weren't really aware, but we're super excited to be able to see Dr. Johnson's work. It serves as the foundation of our Empower the Bystander program. So when we were talking before about there was meaningful work going on at the University of Akron before we centralized or brought that work together, that's one of the stories that's important to us. That student organization has been around longer than our sexual assault and violence education team. So we're grateful for their leadership and their willingness to partner with us. We also have a Coalition Against Sexual Assault. That's a student organization on campus. Our Women's Studies Department has sponsored our Sexual Assault Awareness Month speakers for the last 2 years. Our Psychology Department has worked very, very closely with us. And then, of course, the Rape Crisis Center. I want to spend a little bit of time to just draw your attention to our relationship with the Summit County prosecutor. And I'll tell you a quick story. About 3 years ago in the summer, our Title IX team, members of our Title IX team, were called in and asked to provide training. Not even provide training. Have a consultation meeting with 2 of the Summit County prosecutors, prosecuting attorneys. And we're not sure about the circumstance which prompted that interest in the University of Akron and our protocols and our processes. But it was certainly a lively conversation, a chance for our local prosecutor, their office, to clearly understand our work, where there might be overlap when there's a case that involves a student and a court case in the local jurisdiction. And what are some of the challenges that both the prosecutor might face, as well as what are some of the challenges that a student might face as they go through that. So we had a great conversation, about 6 of us in a room. About 2 months later, our Title IX coordinator was invited to provide training to the entire prosecutor staff. So we were able to go and provide training to 26 of the staff. And that was, again, an interesting audience. Clearly, folks doing work that's very similar to our work, but also achieving different goals in the prosecution of crime, as opposed to our work in providing support for students, as well as upholding our policies through our adjudication process on campus. So it was an exciting but challenging opportunity to train, and no doubt about it, we were training our friends who were lawyers, and so they brought a different spirit, a fun spirit to that engagement. But 3 months later, we were invited to training that was provided by the Summit County prosecutor in an annual victim services conference. And we've been participating ever since. And last year we were able to send 10 of our community members to the Victim Services Conference provided by the prosecutor's office. That's designed to help local police, local prosecuting attorneys in Summit and the surrounding counties an opportunity to better understand the needs of victim services. And so it's a really fun program. There's about 200 of our colleagues from around the region who come together and participate in that training on an annual basis. Following our participation in that a number of years, we were asked to be able to first participate in a press conference that the local prosecutor was holding to be able to announce a Start by Believing campaign within our community. And then the very next week, Sherry Bevan Walsh, our prosecutor, joined us on campus at our sexual assault and violence education team. And so through that story, it really felt to us initially as a challenge of being able to work with a prosecutor and the office that must have experienced some frustration. Otherwise, we know we would not have been called together to be able to meet. But we were provided space and opportunity by taking that challenge and turning it into an opportunity to grow a relationship that over the years has really, really proved beneficial to the University of Akron. So that's one of the I guess the stories of success that we like to talk about is just our ability to be comfortable in the face of challenge and to be patient and listen and to be able to take that challenge as an opportunity to really be able to grow a relationship. So let me tell you a little bit more about some SAVE team successes. We feel really good about our mission and our vision right now. We have some lofty goals, and we make very modest steps to be able to achieve them. But more important than having those lofty goals, we get pushed around by each other, and we listen to each other, and we get a chance to be able to adapt. That's a living mission. It changes every day. It's not that little document that you put on the shelf. And so we feel good about that engagement. We've been invited because of that relationship we just talked about with the Summit County Prosecutor's Office to the SART, the Summit County Sexual Assault Response Team meeting. From our relationship with that student organization, Defined Lines, and our psychology department, we had a doctoral student in psychology develop a program called LIFT, stands for Leverage, Insight, Freedom, and Truth, that helps men talk about not just toxic masculinities, not just misogyny, but also talks about opening and embracing conversations about mental health, wellness, and most importantly, healthy relationships. It's been a really positive program that we were able to get our Akron football team to be able to participate in, and they provided significant positive feedback about how they would change their behavior after participating in that program. So we feel really good about the development of that. That Empower the Bystander bystander intervention program is it's been a long-standing success for us. That's been one of the things that even before our work has been recognized as a SAVE community or our SART team together, that's been providing good work for our students. I want to tell you a little bit about Felicia, who was our president of a coalition against sexual assault. She was an honor student studying math and statistics. And our first campus climate survey occurred in 2015. And in 2017, she graduated, and she was working on her senior honors project. And at that time, we gave her the data that we had collected from our first climate survey. And she turned that into a 20-page report that was submitted as her senior honors project, similar to a master's thesis paper that was produced. But because she was a statistics major, the chair of the statistics department was her advisor in the process, and that relationship meant that when he had questions about what the math meant, he had to be able to ask Felicia, and he had the responsibility through his academic role to be able to make sure she was getting the very best responses to what that really meant in the lived experience of the students. And so Felicia then had to be able to go out to myself and to members of our SAVE team and really investigate and understand. And that academic experience brought in to our SAVE meeting the chair of the statistics department. And at the University of Akron, I can let you know that would never have happened. That's not our psychology department. That's not our sociology department, who are always aligned with the work because of their academic discipline. Really brought in a group of students who do consulting to do statistics work, and brought in the chair of the department, and it really was coming together, a synergy across our campus, just in support of one student's senior project. And while that's not a big event, and that's not an activity that we can turn attendance to, the growth and the development of our network that resulted from her project was pretty fun to watch, and I was super excited to be a part of her work. And then as a result of that project, we've now given the data of our recent campus climate surveys and our benchmarking surveys to our sociology department. They're working with sociology graduate students to be able to help us really take a look at that and look at that data from a critical perspective, not just a reflective perspective, but an academically critical perspective within their discipline. So that's turned into really fun work, and it also brings in faculty who participate in our sexual assault and violence education team, not just because they have an interest in stopping violence on campus, but because it's also tied in with their discipline, and so that makes that engagement for them more meaningful and a party to their job. So that's also a great fun opportunity that's developed. So I also need to share some of our challenges, some of the things that we're still working on. And through our recent grant, we have learned that we need to focus much more on primary prevention. We have some great examples of prevention work and have been doing good prevention, but it was really secondary prevention or tertiary prevention. It was not primary. And so we've learned a lot just by participating in that grant process and being able to ask to take a look at how we're working together. Sustaining faculty, staff, and student engagement has always been a struggle for us. It's not that there's not interest. We're very lucky to have tremendous champions and colleagues on campus who care deeply and talk about our work and ask for us to return and engage in projects together. But we're also a community that 10 years ago had 30,000 students, and now we have 20. And since that time, we have had some tightening of our belt to be able to make sure our budget is the right size for our enrollment. And that has not left significant extra time in anyone's calendar to be able to do any work that is not a priority and expressly written into our job descriptions. And so one of the things that that's about being able to be successful there is we really have learned we can't have any of those, I hope you don't have too many of these meetings where you go and you sit for 50 minutes and you learned what you're supposed to learn and you cover the agenda, but you walk out and you say, oh, there goes 50 minutes. We've learned we just can't afford that experience. Our meetings have to be engaging. They have to be meaningful. They aren't always fun, but when they're done right, they are, because we enjoy doing difficult work together. But we have to work on that engagement. If we're not thinking about how are we making this work easier for someone else, how are we making ourselves open to feedback that we might not want to hear, if we're not specifically thinking about that as we're going through our roles, we limit our opportunity for each other to be able to really help us grow and learn. And that's the magic, that's the fun part when we help each other grow and learn. That's what brings our group back together. So that sustaining faculty and student engagement, we have some ideas about how to make it work, but that's something we continue to work through. We also have a problem with our friends who are experts. We tend to defer to them, and the idea of having all of our colleagues across discipline come together to share all of our ideas, and from them we let the best ideas win, doesn't always work hand in hand with having an expert come in and tell us, well, this is the way it should be. And so we're having to be able to work very, very very, very hard at making sure we're elevating all of our voices, and we're listening to all of our voices, and most importantly, asking in each meeting for participation from each member, so that we are not going through and reading an agenda or going through and reading a report of what happened at the last activity, because we can't afford that missed opportunity for engagement. We've learned that, as we spoke before, that we have some silos that are growing within our community, and so we're trying to reorganize or reshuffle, both within our sexual assault and violence education team. We have as many as 50 students, faculty, and staff who participate. We have typically 30 to 35 meetings a semester after you include all of our subcommittees. And so just sustaining all of that work, just going to the meetings can be a lot. So we have to be careful that we haven't created a structure that is more complicated than it needs to be, and that we're looking always for opportunities to be able to help each other understand and work together to solve problems. In the work that we're doing, there is distrust and doubt. That's a part of just growing up within our community, and something that we have to work through. And again, every challenge that we meet, we try and create an opportunity to be able to build the dialogue and move the trust. And then also we've realized recently that I don't know how to say this. The work that we're doing, especially with our OVW grant, feels like grant work. There is a significant amount of planning. There is a significant amount of categorizing our work into categories so it meets definitions that are required of the work. And just in reflecting with our friends, at the Rape Crisis Center, we know they've been funded through VOCA grants for so long, at least in our area, and we know that VOCA grant funding by the express letter, at least as it's administered in the state, can't be used for primary prevention. And so we're realizing that, again, the work that we're doing is steered and created by our partners, by their resources, by our environment, and we're continuing to have to reshape and rethink about them in critical ways to be able to make sure we're making good progress toward our ultimate goals. So those are some of our challenges. I always fear I ramble, and so I really would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that that folks may have from having listening.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Chandra, for the information and everything that you've shared today. We do not have any questions in the chat box yet, but I will give some time for our colleagues who have joined us to enter any questions that they may have for either of you. Mike, maybe a quick question for you. I know Chandra has given a lot of here's what you should consider in developing your teams, here's where you should start, and obviously you have evolved quite a bit at the University of Akron over the past few years and grown your team to where it's at. But as you go back to the very beginnings or whatnot, is there any tips or anything that you would give others in Ohio just as a moment for pause or something to think through, or oops, don't make this mistake, or learn from here, or any of those things that you would go back to as you reflect on where you started?
Yeah, I would absolutely aim for second or third tier administrators. I have learned that we're in this work for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and so if you can get an assistant or associate dean, they're going to have a good shot of really having some significant leverage in 5 or 6 years. And also, it can be easy to feel as though we're doing this work alone. But there are people at each of our institutions that are doing this work. There are students at our institutions that are serving on the hotlines for some of our local rape crisis centers. We have to go out and find each other and invite each other into the conversation.
Great.
Carrie, if I could quickly, I know we only have 2 minutes. One thing I haven't mentioned, and I think it's kind of evident because we've had a 3-part series on getting these coordinated response teams together, is that often what I hear for countywide SART, especially for smaller counties, is, this seems like a lot of work, right? We had 3 webinar series to talk about this. We only see 1 or 2 sexual assaults, per year. Why would I go through all of this if I'm barely even seeing any cases? And my response to that is, and I think I mentioned this to you, Carrie, is, for me, it's like working at an agency and you haven't had any new staff in 10, 15 years. You have all old timers, and you never update your policies and procedures. So then your staff is operating off of old policies and procedures, and when you finally do get that 1 or 2 new staff that you're about to hire, everybody's rushing to try to put together updated protocols and policies for your job. So it is a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth it. And I also think that sometimes people don't come forward because they don't know teams exist, and people are there to support them as well. So it might not, it's never that it's not happening on your campus or in your community. It might just be people don't know where to turn to. So it's really important to put this.
If I could just add, in our first year at the University of Akron, following our SART organization, we had 35 Title IX referrals. In our second year, we had 100, 150, and now 185. And so what we've found is that by doing this work, we are reaching more students with services that we would not otherwise be able to provide. And also, we would not have been able to sustain the work had we also not seen that response from our community grow. That we wouldn't have been given the opportunity to continue with the same investment that we've been able to provide. So that we feel that partnership is vital, and we have to continue to be out there in order to find the students who need the support.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Well, seeing no questions come through and being at time, I just want to thank once again Mike and Chandra for joining us today. And Chandra, once again, thank you for all your expertise and guidance and help in developing this series. And I'm so thankful that you're back at the Alliance and helping our communities. To those of you on the call or who may be listening to this webinar in the future, Mike and Chandra have so graciously provided their contact information. So as you are reviewing these materials with your teams or with others in your campus or communities and you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to them to ask some questions, pick their brains a bit, whatnot. But thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.